This is a peated bourbon, and it has an amazing underlying corn sweetness, hints of fruit salad and stone fruit like plums and figs, and the whole thing is drenched in peat smoke. And I'm about to tell you exactly how I made it. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse, and this is Still It, and one of the beautiful things about being a home distiller is that you can mix and match styles and ingredients however you like. You don't have to worry about consumers knowing what they're buying. You don't have to worry about something like the TTB telling you what you can label it or call it. So today, I'm going to do a big old smash up of kind of American bourbon, basically a buttload of corn, and an Islay Scotch, a buttload of peat. Should we get stuck in? All right, let's talk ingredients. The recipe for the grist, and obviously the first thing we need if we're going to be calling this thing a bourbon is, well, corn. And I'll level with you guys, I'll be real. Ugh. I'm cheating just a little bit here. This is a Gladfield product. They're a company here in New Zealand, and they make Malted Maize. This is a pretty cool product, to be honest, guys. It comes as whole kernels of corn. The good thing about it is that it does not need to be gelatinized. You don't need to cook it, and it is a whole lot easier to mill or to crush up. The downside is that, like some other malted products, it doesn't have a diastatic power of its own, so we still have to basically treat it like already cooked corn, which is essentially what it is. By the way, guys, the entire recipe and process will be in the description down below in metric, and yes, of course, freedom units as well. I get the feeling I should make a freedom units t-shirt. Anyway, this is going to make up just over half of the entire grist or the grain bill at 5 kilos, and we're aiming for 9.5 kilos in total. Next up, I mean, it seems, oh my god, this one's heavier. Kind of obvious, but we can't really be making a peated bourbon without some peated malt. Once again, this is a Gladfield product. It's upside down, but there you go. And this is grown and peated right here in New Zealand. Obviously, if you're not in New Zealand, you're going to find this hard to find, but there are plenty of other peated malts out there on the market, and any of those should sub in just fine. We're going to be using 4.3 kilograms of peated malt. And lastly, we have some Shepherd's Delight. It has an awesome breadiness to it, but it also has and contributes something a little bit like cola, like Coca-Cola, but erring, in my opinion, more towards kind of glazed fruit. So it's almost like Christmas cake. If you don't have this and you can't get it, you could probably sub it out with just straight crystal malt and you get pretty close to it. We're going to be using 200 grams of this stuff. This is my grain mill, and I have a couple of tips for you guys if you're going to be using these with malted corn or just, you know, corn in general. This is heavy, let me put it down. Number one, if you're using whole unmalted corn, don't bother, it's not going to happen. Cracked corn you will get away with, and malted corn whole you will get away with, but there's a couple of things you need to do to help help these little machines out. They're not built for corn. Corn is pretty extreme. So the first thing you want to do is mix the barley and the corn together. Having something that can easily get through the rollers keeps the rollers turning and, you know, allows the corn to be pulled through a whole lot easier. Number two, adjust the rollers to go as wide as they'll possibly go. Pass everything through once. Get it busted up a little bit. You can adjust the rollers a little bit closer together if you're using a false bottom. I'd suggest the width of a credit card. The easiest way to do that is literally just put a credit card in between the two rollers, adjust it until it's just touching, and then lock it off. If, however, you're using a brew in a bag, you can go even finer if you want to, you know, bump up your efficiency a little bit. Let's talk about the mash. I started with 30 liters of strike water at 72 degrees Celsius, and I was aiming for a mash temperature of 63 degrees Celsius. After mashing in with all of the grain, giving a really good stir up, making sure there's no dough balls, all of that good stuff, I realized that I had missed my mash temperature by a couple of degrees. No problem, this is the Dr. Gratis unit. It has the built-in elements, and I had plenty of headroom, so another 2 liters of boiling water went in along with the elements on for a little while, like I don't know, 5 minutes or something, and I was back up at temperature. At that point, I insulated the bejesus out of it with woolen blankets, double-checked that all the electricity was off to everything, and planned on mashing for an hour and a half. Unfortunately, I had to go be a dad for a little while. So it was 2.5 hours by the time I got back to it. I don't think it's a big deal, but if you guys are, keeping score at home, just full disclosure and all of that. Once your mash is done, it's time to get stuck in with mashing out. Honestly, guys, this is pretty simple. The only tip I would give you here is don't drain it at full speed. Drain it somewhat slowly if you're going through a false bottom. You're just less likely to get things stuck. I decided to go halfway between a fly sparge and a batch sparge. So I did drain all of the liquid out, but I didn't completely refill it. I just sort of gently sprinkled water over the top, water at 70 degrees Celsius. That's this. To make sure that I'm not channeling or just pushing the water straight through to the bottom, that it is actually getting some of those extra sugars out. I think it was about 10 litres in total. The reason I say I think is I don't know. I stopped when I got to 34 litres total in my fermenter and 1.061 as a starting gravity. For those of you, once again, keeping score at home, my first runnings were coming out at 1.069. So I've been thinking for a while that I would really like to test co-pitching a whiskey yeast and an English ale yeast together. The reason is that the bunch of the distilleries in Texas, the distillers from those distilleries, put it into my mind that it was a good thing to do because they are doing it. And I'm finally going to get to do that today because this video is sponsored by Angel Yeast. Thank you, Angel, for sponsoring the video. To be honest, I've got nothing specific to say about them or their products. I'm just going to use their products, and if you want to use them too, then that's entirely up to you. But the other thing they did do to help out was send over 2 of their yeast products. The first being AM-1, which is one of their whiskey yeasts, and the yeast that's specifically used mostly from their product range for single malts, which I think actually fits really well for this type of whiskey. The second thing they sent over was CY115, which is their English ale yeast, and they themselves say that it's actually pretty similar to SO4, which is one of my all-time favorite yeasts. By the way, I'm going to put a link in the description down below. This link is not in any way affiliated with the official Angel Yeast company. It's not part of the sponsorship. It's just a place where I know you can actually get this stuff most of the time. They actually have a sale on at the moment as well. I think the yellow label yeast is on a really good special at the moment. So link down below, guys. Now, I get that co-pitching is kind of sucky for some of you guys. If you're on a budget and you're trying to, be economical about it, buying 2 different yeasts, I get it, you may not want to do that. Because of that, I decided to split the batch. So we ended up with 2 17-litre ferments. Into the first, I put 8 grams of the AM-1 yeast after hydrating it, of course. And in the second, I put 4 grams of AM-1 and 4 grams of the CY115. Once the wash in both buckets reached 25 degrees Celsius, I pitched the yeasts into each, making sure to label them. I've made that mistake before, and it sucks. And this time around, I did decide to actually use an airlock, just to make sure that the only thing I'm assessing from fermentation, is the yeasts. They were fermented at 25 degrees Celsius. After 8 days, both fermenters fermented out dry, which means that I had 17 litres of each, about 16 after dealing with the tube and so on and so forth. Today, what I decided to do is use the 50-litre keg still. So all of the low wines go in, and I've built the still with 2 plates. So it's going to be a one and done run, which is going to give us roughly the same amount of distillation, a little bit more perhaps, as a standard double pot distillation. I tried to keep the cuts as similar as possible for both runs. I did the first one by a taste and then mimicked it with the second, double checking here and there to make sure that cuts were lining up at the same points in time. And they did. So here's what I did, guys. I took 50 mils of 4 shots, ditched it. Next, I took 400 mils of heads and whacked those straight into the feints jars, followed by 2 jars of 200 mils each. That were kind of the gradient between heads and hearts. In both cases, I decided to not use either of those jars, instead collecting 660 mils of hearts for the standard whiskey pitched version and 650 mils of hearts for the co-pitched version, both of them, the still stopped at 38% ABV coming off the spout. So in this case, yes, I did go down relatively low into the tails. All right, team, it is time to taste this stuff, and the first thing I want to do is try and figure out whether or not I can actually taste, in a somewhat blind test, the difference between the co-pitch version and the non-co-pitch version. Unfortunately, I am home by myself right now, and there's no one here to set this up for me. So I've devised a wee plan that I think might work. So I've got 3 little sample bottles here. All 3 of them have a small piece of tape on the bottom, but only one has a wee vivid mark on the bottom of that tape. And what I'm going to do is fill each of these bottles with 20 mils of spirit. The 2 that don't have the permanent mark on the bottom are going to have the standard, just the AM-1 whiskey in it, and the one that does have the vivid on the bottom is going to have the co-pitch version. All 3 bottles go into, and to put these, without looking at the bottom of them, by a glass. I already think I know which one it is just from smelling, but let me have a taste and we shall see. I am fairly certain that this is the odd one out here. This is the one that was co-pitched. The reason being is it is slightly brighter. It is slightly more floral's not the right word. Fruit salad, I think, is maybe the word I'm looking for. You know, like generic, you open up a can of fruit salad, stick your nose in it, that kind of thing. But it is also bringing through more of the exact flavors I was expecting from the Shepherd's Delight. So richer sugars, more like molasses, and the dark stone fruit flavors. I'd put money on that one for sure. Bam. Okay, I am right. Anyway, what I do also have, let me put this in here and pour a little force-aged version of these. Now this is actually both of these blended together with very lightly recharred used US white oak. So it's the Kentucky barrel staves that you get for use in smokers and stuff. This one as well has gone kind of cloudy in the ultrasonic thing overnight. But let's give it a nudge. Once again, the only reason I'm doing this is to get an idea of what this is going to taste like in the future. I love that second use US white oak wood profile in things like this. So good. It just kind of sits there and you almost don't, I don't know, you almost don't notice it, but it just hums away underneath, brings everything together, gives it a backbone. I like it. Definitely get peat, definitely get grain. The corn is there, and I've been finding more and more, the more I use the malted corn, I've noticed that I don't get nearly as much of that kind of dusty, traditional bourbon flavor corn that almost, like it's nothing like, but it reminds me of apple in an interesting way. There's a chance that perhaps I went just a little bit low, trying to delve down for more smoke. It's not wet cardboard, it's not wet dog, it's none of that stinky ass stuff. It's just a few of those flavors that come out just before that. And it's difficult with a whiskey like this that's got so many big, bold flavors in there that it's hard to tell whether or not that's going to age out with oak and time, or whether it's going to be almost accentuated by it as the ABV of the product most likely slowly drops during aging. It'll be interesting to see which happens if you would prefer not to live on the edge. You know, maybe stop it a little bit sooner. Right now it's totally not a problem. It's just maybe it'll turn with time. That corn sweetness sitting underneath everything is really interesting. The flavor contributions from the yeast I think are doing really well. And I'm glad I put that small amount of Shepherd's Delight in there as well. It's sort of almost mimicking, like almost pretending to be a sherried Islay. It's kind of fun. I'm really happy with this. I'm very interested to see what happens as I age it. I know this is going to kill some of you. I've done the test that I wanted to do. Yes, I could definitely pick a difference in the two yeasts. I'm going to mix them together, proof them down, whack open them, because now I've got enough information, just complete anecdotal information for myself to say that yes, it's worth doing that again. I just want to age this as it is, and I can do more testing later on. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. I need to say a huge thank you to the Patreons. A thank you, Patreons. Thoroughly appreciate your support. It's very, very much appreciated. You let me do what I do. If there are those of you out there that are enjoying this content and you'd like to help give back to the channel, you can go to chasethecrafter.com/support to find out all the different ways you can help out. If you want, you can pick up some of the merch that you can find out where to buy that on the channel itself, or if it's right for you, you can sign up for Patreon as well. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up down below. Drop a comment letting me know what you think of this project. Let me know if you're going to try it out yourself. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Keep on chasing the craft. See ya.